Hello, everybody. Welcome to Build Fly Go. So this is one in our series of avionics videos where we're going to cover the panel layout, panel selection, selection of components, and the wiring. Also the planning, the right sort of the wiring design, how we came about it, decisions that were made, and really sort of watching both a time lapse of the entire avionics, which is interesting from an overview perspective, but we'll also be doing deeper dive videos to cover a lot of the, sort of more detailed bits. So this is our first big time lapse. This is the first half of, maybe not so much half, the first big chunk of the avionics sort of figuring out, the harness figuring out where we're finding the basic lengths. We're finding the sort of the rough lengths of where things are going to go. We're figuring out where things are going to be placed. We're sort of placing them there for the first time and making sure everything fits, and that there's enough space for wires, good routing for the wires and things like that. This is the first view. You'll notice that we're going to move the panel around a few different times. And it's going to go on the panel, off the panel, and a few different things throughout this series of videos. This first video is before we take the harness, I guess the harness measurements or the rough harness off of the panel initially and put it on the pegboard. It's not really a pegboard, it's a piece of plywood that we put nails in, which you'll see in the next video. Stay tuned for that. But in this video, what we're doing is we're sort of sanity checking my initial electrical design and my initial sort of avionics design, which we'll do a video with a few more details on that later. But I'm sanity checking to make sure that I can, I can wire this, right? Like I find that a lot of an electrical design for something like this for me is I sort of draw it all out. I actually use Google Sheets to draw it all out. I make slides to not Google Sheets, Google Slides. I make slides of the block diagrams using Google Slides. And once I have that done, then I'm going to start wiring doing a rough wiring of the switches, doing a rough wiring of the devices to see if it makes sense, right? See if once I am off of the computer screen and I'm looking at manuals, I'm looking at physical things, if it works. So this first view is I just have the plexi panel up on these sort of one by one little structural braces, and putting all the wires in. I'm sorry, putting the switches, all of the switches are getting put into the panel right now, and I'm running the grounds. Most of these switches are actually switching grounds. They're for devices. They're not switching power. You'll notice the blue wires are my switch wires. So wherever I have a blue wire in a harness, I know that it's a wire going to a switch. I also defined gray wires as sensor wires of some sort, right? So it's noticing if a door sensor or a position sensor for something or something like that. So there's a little bit of method to the madness here. Greens, of course, are grounds or shield grounds and rather shield grounds and other grounds like that. Black, of course, are power grounds or switch grounds. Anyway, so back to this. So you'll notice on the left, I've already sort of figured out the radio stack, and I've made a couple of little brackets to sort of hold it in place. And you'll notice that I am running on the right side of the screen is the pilot side, right? Of course, behind it. So those are the ignition switches that are on the far right there, and then below the main screen are sort of master, alternator, backup battery, lights, things like that. And then just after that is a flap button, the flap switch, which is sort of the burly looking one. It's a Honeywell switch. A flap switch there, and then the TCW Tech. That's the oil cooler baffle. switches for the ferry tank pumps. There's three of those, right? The left, the right, and the rear pump switch. The rear pump switch is usually not actually plugged into anything. It's just there, right? I want to be able to toggle it from there. And of course, now we can't see the rest of the switches, but the rest of the switches were cooler TCW Tech baffle coolers for left and right. Okay, so here was the first move. I was running it was getting tight over there, running out of space, so I moved the panel to the desk so that we could look at it. And then finally decided, okay, let's just put this thing in the in sort of the structure, right? So there's the panel on the front, sub panel, there's the ribs, and the sort of the skin that goes over the top there. And this is going to allow us to now actually put the devices in place and start running the rough, very, very rough locations, routings for these wires, right? At this point, we are still, we're sort of 90% figured out where things are going to go. Everything still needs to be tweaked and fine-tuned. The GAT27 on the far right there, that's where it's going to go. The GEA, that's where it's going to go. The two IBBS batteries, that's where it's going to go. The radio stack is in place. What you see right to the left of the radio stack there is actually the GTR20, and I'm sort of trying out a bracket for it there. It's not going to go right there. It's actually going to go between those two braces. You might see it later in the video there. And the big concern here was we didn't know where to put the vertical power box. A lot of people put it under the panel, sort of hanging low. I wanted to sort of keep it out of the way a little bit more than that. That's perfectly fine. That works. We just wanted it a little bit further out of the way. So we decided to put it behind the sub panel, which is where we are. You can see me putting pins on the switches there that go to the VPX. Behind the sub panel on these pieces of L extruded aluminum. Of course, we're going to cut these down. These are actually too thick. We're going for thinner stuff that I just didn't have in the house at that point. So it's currently upstairs in the kitchen, oddly enough. But so there's that thicker stuff there now. So this is far enough from the firewall that it's not going to get hot. And it's behind the sub panel, which keeps it sort of out of the way. A concern there, of course, also is, can I reach that? And the more I thought about it, the more we decided that even though that is further forward in the airplane and out of reach, sort of horizontally out of reach, if I ever need to get to that device, I'm going to be on my back under the panel anyway, and it is incredibly accessible right there if I'm on my back under the panel. Right? I don't have to reach around anything. I don't have to move anything out of the way, right? Like it's not in the way of any other wiring. So I like that spot. I like that I can get to it. It's out of the way and it's not blocking anything, which you'll see when the GTR20 goes in, just above and to the left of it. Though it's sort of nicely out of the way of sort of your knees and such, it is very much in the way of things inside the panel. So the way to get in the panel there is to remove the screen, the PFD, and unplug it so that you have that big hole right there. You'll notice that we're running a lot of red wires right now. I decided I wanted to see what the wire routes would be. So let's run, I decided let's run most of the power wires here so that we could, have real wires going places. So I put pins on some of them. You'll notice I have pins on the IBBS ones, and I'm putting quick disconnect terminals, QC terminals, the red ones on the end of a lot of the grounds as well, just to sort of hold them in place. I realize I might actually have to chop some of those off later. It is what it is. It's part of this right now as we figure out where things are going to go. And you'll notice things are going to change drastically once we're done with this part in about 4 minutes. Actually, maybe in the next video. So maybe in the next video you'll see the big change. But here we are, right? Like putting all the devices in place, doing some basic wire management, basic wire routing. I'm cleaning up some of the wires. Mary's going to step in momentarily, and we're actually going to start like zip tying things and like creating little bundles to get a feel for where things are. But what this let us do is we know these routes are good. We know that the wire lengths are accurate here, so that when we move to, that's my niece, when we moved to the full harness, um, we can get to, we know the lengths and we're good. So you'll notice I just put in power wire, power and grounds for the GTN there. There's a lot of them. And power and grounds for the IBBS and some of the IBBS, both of them, and then some of the other devices as well. And all of those go back to the vertical power. Well, yes, all of those in this case go back to the vertical power or the IBBS, but in some sense they go back to vertical power. I've mentioned this before. I 100% believe you have to use the vendor manuals for this kind of stuff, and you have to follow them. You'll notice that I have printed off on the left, that's one of the IBBS wiring sheets, and on the right, that's actually the GTN basic power wiring sheet on the right there. So use those. And on the far right is my block diagram for where the power is for everything. Use them. Don't make this stuff up. Don't deviate from the plans when it comes to guidance on definitely power. Absolutely, definitely do not deviate from the plans, from the installation manuals provided by the manufacturers for the power. Wiring this stuff wrong. If you're lucky, it's just not going to work. If you're unlucky, it's going to release its smoke and burn out the first time you turn it on. If you're very unlucky, it's going to work until you absolutely need it and then burn out at the worst possible situation. So follow the vendor manuals. Here we are. Mary's helping me. Mary's very good at like helping organize this stuff and combing wires, and you'll see in future videos how she, oh my gosh, she's keeping me sane here. She's very good at this. So yes, follow the vendor manuals. As usual, this is experimental aviation. Do this at your own risk. My goal here is to show how we've done this and how this is very doable. It is time consuming, of course, but I found it to be incredibly rewarding to, like there's no better way to really, really, really know how your systems are designed than to design and install them yourselves, right? I'm very fond of the big avionics shops of Stein and some of the others. They do incredible work, and they say to you, oh, there's the GTR, right? See where it goes, sort of in the way. They do incredible work. And they're insanely helpful. Those guys are helpful to us, even if we're not buying everything from them. So they're an option if you don't want to do this. But, we wanted to show you that you can. Anyway, so more videos to come, many, many more videos to come. Please stay tuned, and we'll talk to you soon.